Hey everybody, welcome to God's Descent, the Gospels. We're going to read from the Gospel of Mark, chapter 9, verses 2 through 10. Jesus took Peter, James, and John and led them up a high mountain apart by themselves. And he was transfigured before them, and his clothes became dazzling white, such as no fuller on earth could bleach them. Then Elijah appeared to them along with Moses, and they were conversing with Jesus. Then Peter said to Jesus in reply, "Rabbi, it is good that we are here. Let us make 3 tents, one for you, one for Moses, and one for Elijah." He hardly knew what to say. They were so terrified. Then a cloud came, casting a shadow over them. From the cloud came a voice, "This is my beloved Son. Listen to him." Suddenly, looking around, they no longer saw anyone but Jesus alone with them. As they were coming down from the mountain, he charged them not to relate what they had seen to anyone except when the Son of Man had risen from the dead. So they kept the matter to themselves, questioning what rising from the dead meant. The Gospel of the Lord. Okay, so just things right off the bat. If you happen to be, most of you have probably moved over to the podcast version because I have a face for radio. So if you're doing it, that's great. I just want to explain I have a cold sore on the left side and a blood blister on the right side of my lip. Both of those are from getting headbutted by my children. You don't really know before you get into parenting that they're out to get you. They want you gone as soon as possible, if it can be. So they've been headbutting me lately. No clue why. Anyway, so okay. The gospel today. I'm just gonna. This is a confusing time, and I know there's this growing sense of that. Not just the last year, things that are going on now, and I know that the Christians that I know and talk to, there's just a general, what's going on? This is, things are looking weird. So I wanted to take a few seconds and kind of look at it look at the gospel in the light of what's going on, or maybe look at what's going on in the light of the gospel, whichever way you want to say it. As a side note, I just like knowing these little tidbits about the lectionary. So the gospels, the first books of the New Testament, Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John. We have years A, B, and C in the lectionary. And so if you are in year A, it's Matthew, B is Mark, Luke is the third year, or C, and then John is kind of peppered in there, and he's in the really serious and important times. So if you're ever wondering what year of the lectionary you're in, just listen for the gospel. If it's in Matthew, it's A, Mark, B, Luke, C. So just a little side. And I'm just like, I didn't know that. Or most of you are probably like, yep, learned it when I was 5 years old, Nick. Thanks for that. So Jesus took Peter, James, and John and led them up a high mountain apart by themselves. So here's the thing. This is the inner circle. This is his buds. These are his BFFs, if you will. Like out of the 12 that followed him around, he had these 3 that are kind of like the inner circle, and which can sound really cool. A couple of things. One, again, I just like to put myself in the scene, and I have this weird thing. If you look at my phone, the people that I know and love and send messages to all the time, they're not their name. There's usually a nickname that I've chosen for some reason. Like one of my sisters is Stister because that's how I pronounced sister when I was little. My other sister is Smeefy. There's just weird ones. I have some weird ones in there. My best friend has a really unique name. Like they're all very unique names. And that's just like a way of, I don't know, having a bond or whatever. So I always picture this, that Jesus, he's got his 3 and you got Peter, James, and John. And I just always think of like Pete, Jimmy, and Johnny. I know it's very informal, but I see Jesus being like, Pete, just get Jimmy and Johnny over here. I want to talk to them. It's just the way I see it. And so maybe now forever, you'll hear it that way too. When you hear that, when he's referring to Peter, he's just like, hey, Petey, what's up? Petey, Jimmy, and Johnny. Anyway, total side note. They were the inner circle. And that can be really, that would be amazing, right? Offhand, it'd be like, oh, wow. Just to be like in that inner circle, to be like when he would go up the mountain to pray, he'd ask them to come with him. And that would be cool. But given the history of Christianity, it's actually best to look at how things ended for them. Peter was crucified upside down. James was put to death by Herod Agrippa, and John was exiled to the island of Patmos. So in the short term, it didn't turn out too well for them, but it actually did turn out amazing for them. We know this. But my point is that the inner circle, like those who were invited in, and that's us, those who are invited into that, it doesn't often look like we thought it would look. We think it's going to pan out perfectly the entire time, or there'll be some slumps or some peaks and valleys. There's the valley of shadow of death, but not usually. But this for all of these guys, we saw how it ended. And I just want to, that should be an encouragement to know that, no, this is what lies ahead for those who follow Jesus. One way or another, this is what lies ahead. And the thing is, it's not about you handling it perfectly and being like the perfect disciple. Because if you look, so Jesus was the perfect one. And what did they do to him? His disciples followed him in his footsteps with the power of God, not perfectly, but they followed him. And what did they do? They all ended up in some form of martyrdom. And so you can be as loving and as kind-hearted and all the things we're supposed to be. You can be all of those. You can be as loving as possible, and you will still be condemned. I just want you to, that's our history, and that's our future. Jesus said, if they hated me, they're going to hate you. Just and not, again, I've brought that up in the past, not hate you because you're a jerk or you're arrogant or whatever. No. Just because you won't lie, because if he's the way, the truth, and the life, and you stick to him and you won't vary away from that, if you won't sidestep off the path, if you won't be moved away from him, you will be condemned because of him. You just will. In one way or another, small ways and big ways. This is our history. This is the history of Christianity. And that's fine. That is actually okay. So in the early church, Nero was like between the 50s and the 80s, just the first, like 50, I think it was 56 to 80 something. Anyway, Nero had this really, really right in the time of the first disciples. We got Nero doing, and we know how Nero was. But you know how he started? At first, he was attempting to accuse Christians and get them jailed for like arson and crimes like that. But there was always need for evidence, and it was slowing things down in the court system and stuff. So basically, he started a campaign of, and other people jumped on board, of calling all Christians, just wholesale, calling Christians haters of humanity. That sounds so familiar. Haters of humanity. Just call them haters. If you say it enough, they're going to believe that Christians are the haters. And then you don't have to do much else after that. After that is what the world believes. And that was in the first generation of the church. That's what was going on. And so, again, this inner circle, you know how they ended, and we know how every generation of the church goes. In some way or another, we follow him to the cross. We do. We follow him in hopefully the same humility that we need, the same humility he had, in the same merciful way, and just as just and doing what is right. We follow him. And that's where it's going to end up. Because we can feel like, well, no, but if I'm sincere enough, if I just face to face with somebody, and I get that, if I could just explain myself, it won't matter. Sometimes it just won't matter. Sometimes this is what you're going through. And I know that there are fears right now. There are things that are kind of brewing underneath. And there's like this, like a nameless fear. Like there's just that going around, and that's understandable. But you don't have to be afraid. This is because when Nero did that, and when that persecution started wholesale, it was the Christians' martyrdom and kindness and their humility in the way they were led to slaughter that caused a vast interest in Christianity. It was that. It wasn't the, like, their huge buildings. I love cathedrals, by the way. I'm not bashing them, saying, but it wasn't things like that at the time. What was it? It was the way they suffered, the way they didn't vary or waver. That's what caused a vast interest in Christianity and in seeking out Jesus. And the thing is, that's okay. It's good to know that that's ahead of us. Because again, then we don't have to be all the things we have to be. We can just say, okay, I'm going to do the best I can. I'm going to follow Jesus, and I'll follow wherever he leads. That's all. That's where I'll go. I'll go wherever he leads me. And so they're up on the mountain, and he was transfigured before them, and his clothes became dazzling white, such as no fuller on earth could bleach them. I just think of that OxyClean commercial. He makes your whites whiter and your brights brighter. I don't know. I hear that. See, it's not good to read the Gospels like I do. And then Elijah appeared to them along with Moses, and they were conversing with Jesus. So Elijah and Moses, both of them encountered God on a mountain as well. But also, so Elijah and Moses represents the law. Elijah represents the prophets, which is basically the summation of the entire Old Covenant, the Old Testament. So here we have the law and the prophets meeting on this mountain with Jesus. And I love it because Peter said to Jesus in reply, Rabbi, it's good that we're here. Let us make 3 tents, one for you, one for Moses, and one for Elijah. So first, they have the Feast of Tabernacles, the Feast of Booths, the Feast of Tents, they call it. And for them, it was a time of celebrating harvest, of the completion, things like that, of blessing. So for them, that time that they celebrate, and that's what they were celebrating at the time. For Peter, he was like, this is it. I don't think what I'm seeing right now, it can't get much better than this. I'm seeing Moses, Elijah, and I'm seeing Jesus. It's all glowy and he's talking. This has got to, let's just build tents here. Like, this has got to be the completion. This has got to be the fulfillment. And you can almost see Peter being like, dude, this wasn't as hard as I thought it'd be. Like, following him right up to here, we'll just stay here. This is perfect. So there's an aspect where you understand why he said it, because of the understanding of the Feast of Booths. But there's also a bit, I as a joke, that became a part of our vernacular in the family. Like, if we're having a really good time, Jason and I, those times when you're like genuinely laughing with each other and you know it's happening and you want to ruin the moment by commenting about it, that's what I do. Then I always say, we should just build a tent, because that's my Peter voice. That's how PD talked. But like, that's that idea of like, this is so good, I don't want to leave this. And you've probably heard people talk about this verse before, like Peter just being like, let's just stay here. I don't want anything else but this. Let's just stay here. And we know on a deeper level that is not what was happening. This wasn't a place to set the tent up and to stay. So Thomas Aquinas, in one of his sermons, he said, Peter did not yet understand this when he wanted to remain with Christ on the mountain. It has been reserved for you, Peter, but for after death. For now, Jesus says, go down to toil on the earth, to serve on the earth, to be scorned and crucified and suffer hunger. The way goes down to be exhausted on his journey. The spring goes down to suffer thirst, and you refuse to suffer. Just this idea that the way, the truth, and the life, the one who is meeting with the law and the prophets in front of your eyes, he goes down. He is everything, and he is going down to be emptied, and you refuse to suffer. And it's just a wonderful challenge, because that's the deeper level. Is even Christianity, Christendom to Apostolic Age. If you get a chance, read that book. Read it a million times, memorize it. From Christendom to Apostolic Age. But the idea is that there are times when it's not even that everybody has to be Christian, but there are times in societies when Christianity is accepted. And even if people don't believe, it's not hunted down, it's not persecuted. And it never stays that way. And it moves from that into apostolic age, where suddenly you have to be an apostle. Suddenly you have to advance the kingdom. Suddenly you're being required, it is being required of you to stand. And we don't want to move into that. We want to think about like the days gone by, like the America I used to know. This is the church I used to know. The church I grew up in looks so different now, blah, 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 all these things. That's all valid and true. And you want to just set up a tent when it was really good. But that's not our path. That's not the call. Our call is to follow Jesus wherever he goes, because it's always better wherever he is. If he stayed on the mountain, great. That'd be the end. But as he descended, we know we should too. So then this cloud came, casting a shadow over them, and from the cloud came a voice. This is my beloved son. Listen to him. And this is, on the Mountain of Transfiguration, Catechism 459. The Father commands, listen to him. Jesus is the model for the Beatitudes and for the norm of the new law. Love one another as I have loved you. This love implies an effective offering of oneself after his example. We follow Jesus. What did he do? He had this amazing moment, this moment on the mountain that's insane. I can't even go there mentally to think about what that was like for Peter, Jimmy, and Johnny. Just to be there and see this happening and to have it be over and we know what happens. We know what Jesus was leading to. So then suddenly looking around, they no longer saw anyone but Jesus alone with them. And I love it. Scott Hahn points out in one of his Bible studies that Moses and Elijah have relinquished their place to Jesus alone. I love it. Like they make this last appearance almost like an encore, they're the supporting cast and they bow and there's a spotlight and then they just kind of move their hand over and point to Jesus and then they disappear. The law and the prophets have made way for Jesus alone. They have relinquished their place to Jesus alone, which I love. It's so beautiful. And so they're on their way down. They're coming down from the mountain. And Jesus charges them not to relate what they had seen, except when the Son of Man had risen from the dead, which is pretty blatant about what's coming. I mean, it's a pretty straightforward sentence, like until the Son of Man has risen from the dead. Pretty clear. And this is Jesus trying to be like, okay, listen, what you just saw isn't going to make any sense until after the fact. So don't even tell people about this. Don't even tell people what just happened. They won't understand. Just wait till I've risen from the dead. And I love this because as blatant as that is, it's almost like Jesus kind of steps ahead or whatever. And so they kept the matter to themselves, questioning what rising from the dead meant. And I just love it. I just love it so much. They're like, that's a pretty straightforward, like rising from the dead. It implies that you die and he'll rise again. And they're like, but what does it mean really? Like, rising, dead. Like, I just like it. I love it. Because actually, that's the point to me. Like, well, first of all, okay, Catechism 568, Christ's transfiguration aims at strengthening the apostles' faith in anticipation of his passion. The ascent onto the high mountain prepares for the ascent to Calvary. Jesus is trying to prep them. He's trying to show them so much, not just like one lesson plan, but trying to show them everything as he goes. And he's trying to prepare them for what has to come. And they just don't get it. And so just never, ever, ever forget that our founding fathers, the first people that Jesus built his church on, the ones that walked with him and saw him, they were often relatively confused and clueless as to the significance of the events in which they were currently in. We see this a lot in scripture where they're asking the dumbest questions and you get Jesus just going, like face palm almost, if that wasn't such an outdated thing. Just like, oh man, you guys, like even, Peter, James and John, they're up there with Jesus. They're in this inner circle. And later in this same chapter, they're arguing about like, so Jesus, who's going to be the best one in heaven? I'm pretty sure it's me, right? Like they're still doing that after what they just saw. Like after all that craziness, they're still doing that, which I love. Take comfort in that. We have Peter, James, and John. We have these three like pillars of our faith. And they walk down the mountain going, dude, what is he even talking? I don't know. Maybe he needs to take a nap. I'm not sure what he's talking about. Like they truly speculating. And so they don't understand what's going on. And that is fine because the human side, these are humans. These are just idiotic humans that he chose to follow him. And they're wandering around not getting it. And it's okay because the human side, the fragmented side of us, like of our part of the story, it doesn't derail or ruin or in any way besmirch the divine side. It doesn't ruin what God's plan is. You can't. If he asked you to be a part of this, which he has, you can't ruin it because you don't know what's going on. And out of this whole gospel, especially this weekend and with so many things coming up and so many things that are coming across my feed that people are worried about and concerned about, I wanted to take a second and sort of just address it in this light. Here we have people who they saw Moses and Elijah. They heard somehow an audible voice of God the Father. And they still were like, I don't get it. I don't get it. That should be an encouragement to us. You don't have to know what's going on. You usually don't until after the fact, or maybe when you make it across the River Jordan. Maybe that's when you know. We'll understand it all by and by. Maybe that's when we get that clarity. Maybe sometimes you get some on this earth, but for the most part, you don't get it. So what are you supposed to do? What then? If I'm not going to understand it, what do I do? In Micah 6:8, it's just one of the greatest. It's like what kind of runs as a ticker through my head all the time when I'm like, because I'm like, like, what do I do? And it's just, what does the Lord require of you? What is right? To do justly, to love mercy, and to walk humbly with your God. That's what you do right now, this weekend, with if you're parents, or if you're a youth listening and you're to deal with your parents, which can be tough. Just ask my kids. Maybe you're trying to live the Catholic life as openly and beautiful as possible. Maybe you find yourself clamping down and not wanting to speak out because you're afraid of what's going on. I mean, who knows? Wherever you are on the spectrum, you don't have to understand what's going on. All you have to do is do justly, like do what is right. Be merciful to those. Love mercy, it says. Love mercy. It's so hard to be merciful for us. Like, oh, fine. Okay, fine. I'll show you mercy. But the scriptures say to love mercy. So do what is right. Love being merciful to those who don't. And then just walk humbly with your God. And that doesn't mean be weak. Humility is not weakness. It doesn't mean back down. It doesn't mean compromise. It doesn't mean water down anything. Humility is different than that. Humility recognizes the truth of the matter. It recognizes your place with God. It recognizes your place in the whole economy of mercy, in the economy of grace, in this whole world. It just recognizes your place. It recognizes that, my mind's pretty cracked. I'm doing the best I can. I'm going to keep my eyes on him. I'm going to do what's right. I'm going to love being merciful. And I'm going to walk humbly with my God. I'm just going to walk with him. You can walk with him through today, through this weekend, through this next, weeks and months. You can just walk with him. There have been times countless times in my life, just infinite times in my life where I'm just going, okay, do justly, love mercy, walk humbly. Do justly, love mercy, walk humbly. Justice, mercy, humility. Justice, mercy, humility. I find myself trying to do that in my weakest moments, trying to just cling to that. What am I supposed to do? I don't know I don't know how to handle what's going on. I don't know. But I'm going to do what is right. I'm going to love being merciful, and I'm going to walk humbly with my God wherever he leads me. Down from the Mount of Transfiguration, down to the cross, okay. Because that also leads to resurrection. We are Easter people, and is our song. I can't say it right now because we're in Lent, but you know what I'm talking about. We are Easter people. We have a happy note. We end on a great amen. We just need to do justly, love mercy, and walk humbly wherever he leads us. See you next week.